The scorching Arizona sun beat down on the cracked pavement of Route 66 as 12-year-old Marcus Riley sat against the weathered brick wall of a closed gas station. His worn sneakers had holes in both soles, and his faded Superman t-shirt hung loose on his thin frame. 3 years living on the streets had taught him which corners offered shade during the brutal afternoon heat and which dumpsters behind restaurants had the freshest discards. Marcus wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be in 7th grade, playing basketball after school, maybe arguing with his mom about doing homework. But life had other plans. When his mother lost her battle with cancer 2 years ago, and his father never came back from that liquor store run 5 years prior, Marcus became another invisible kid in the system. Foster home after foster home, each worse than the last, until he decided the streets of Phoenix were kinder than the people paid to care for him. He clutched a tattered paperback book he'd found in a donation bin, its pages yellowed and corners bent. Reading was his escape, his way of forgetting the growling in his stomach and the uncertainty of where he'd sleep tonight. The public library had become his sanctuary until they started asking too many questions about why a kid his age wasn't in school. The rumble started as a distant thunder, growing louder until it shook the ground beneath him. Marcus looked up to see a formation of motorcycles rolling into the gas station lot. Chrome gleamed under the desert sun, black leather vests adorned with patches and insignias. The Hells Angels. Marcus had seen them before, had heard the stories, knew enough to stay invisible and out of their way. The lead bike was a massive Harley-Davidson, midnight black with flames painted along the tank. The rider who dismounted stood well over 6 feet, his arms covered in intricate tattoos that told stories of brotherhood and battles. His name was Jake Ironside Morrison, a Vietnam veteran who traded one brotherhood for another. His weathered face bore scars that spoke of a life lived hard and unapologetically. Behind him, 11 more riders parked in formation, their engines cutting off in succession until the desert silence returned, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal. But it was the passenger on the third bike that caught Marcus's attention. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, with blonde pigtails and a pink helmet decorated with unicorn stickers. She seemed entirely out of place among the leather and chrome, yet completely comfortable as her father, a stocky biker named Tommy Wrench Patterson, helped her off the bike. The girl's name was Emma, and she was chattering excitedly about the ride, her eyes bright with joy. "She is hungry, Daddy," she announced, tugging on Tommy's vest. Her father smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his intimidating exterior into something gentle and loving. The dichotomy wasn't lost on Marcus. These men, feared by many, were fathers, brothers, sons. They were human beneath the leather and reputation. Jake gathered his crew near the vending machines, discussing their route to the rally in Sturgis. They had been riding since dawn, pushing through the heat to make good time. Emma danced around them, her energy boundless despite the long ride. Tommy pulled out a package of cookies from his saddlebag, handing them to his daughter. She tore into them with the enthusiasm only a child could muster, barely chewing before swallowing. Marcus watched from his corner, invisible as always. He had perfected the art of being overlooked, of being just another piece of urban decay that people's eyes slid past without registering. His stomach twisted as he watched Emma eat, remembering his own breakfast of stale bread he'd found behind the diner on 5th Street. The bikers were laughing now, their deep voices carrying across the lot as they shared stories and planned the next leg of their journey. Jake was in the middle of a story about a close call on black ice last winter when Emma's laughter suddenly stopped. Tommy turned to check on his daughter, his smile fading instantly. Emma's face had gone pale, her hands clutching at her throat. She tried to cough, but no sound came out. Her eyes widened with panic as she struggled to breathe. Tommy dropped to his knees beside her, his voice rising in panic. "Emma, baby, what's wrong?" The other bikers crowded around, their camaraderie instantly shifting to alarm. Jake pushed through, his military training kicking in as he assessed the situation. "She is choking," he barked. "Someone call 911. Tommy's hands shook as he tried to remember what to do, his mind blanking in the face of every parent's nightmare. He attempted to reach into Emma's mouth, but Jake pulled his arm back. "Don't, you'll push it deeper." Jake's voice was steady but urgent. He positioned himself behind Emma, his large hands preparing to perform the Heimlich maneuver, but his fingers fumbled, unsure of the correct placement on such a small child. Emma's lips were turning blue. Her small hands clawed desperately at her throat, her eyes streaming tears as her body fought for oxygen it couldn't get. The cookie had lodged perfectly, completely blocking her airway. Seconds felt like hours as the bikers stood frozen, these tough men rendered helpless by a choking child. One of them had his phone out, shouting their location to the emergency dispatcher. But everyone knew the ambulance wouldn't arrive in time. Not out here, not in the industrial outskirts of Phoenix where response times stretched to 15 or 20 minutes on a good day. Emma was turning darker, her movements becoming weaker as oxygen deprivation began shutting down her small body. Marcus had seen the whole thing unfold. Every survival instinct told him to stay hidden, to remain invisible, to not draw attention to himself. These were Hell's Angels. Getting involved meant questions he couldn't answer, scrutiny he couldn't afford. But as he watched Emma's desperate struggle, something deeper than self-preservation took over. He remembered Mrs. Chun, the nurse at the last foster home who actually cared. She had taught him basic first aid, insisting that everyone should know how to save a life. She had practiced with him using a teddy bear, showing him the exact placement for the Heimlich on children versus adults, making him repeat it until his hands remembered even when his mind might forget. Marcus dropped his book and ran toward the circle of bikers. His thin legs carried him faster than they had in months, adrenaline overriding the weakness from malnutrition. "Move," he shouted, his young voice cracking but determined. "I know what to do." The bikers turned, shocked to see the scrawny homeless kid charging toward them. Jake's first instinct was to block him, to protect Emma from this unknown element. But something in the boy's eyes, a certainty mixed with desperate urgency, made him step aside. Marcus dropped to his knees behind Emma, his small frame actually an advantage as he wrapped his arms around her from behind. He found the spot just above her navel, made a fist with one hand, grasped it with the other, and pulled inward and upward with quick, sharp thrusts. Once, twice, nothing. Emma's body was going limp. 3 times. 4. Tommy was sobbing now, his massive frame shaking. On the 5th thrust, the cookie dislodged. It shot from Emma's mouth and skittered across the pavement. She gasped, a horrible wheezing sound that was the most beautiful thing anyone there had ever heard. Air flooded her lungs as she coughed violently, her color slowly returning from that terrifying blue-gray back to pink. She gulped oxygen like a drowning person breaking the surface, each breath ragged but precious. Tommy scooped his daughter into his arms, holding her so tightly she squeaked in protest. "Daddy, too tight," she managed between coughs, and he laughed through his tears, loosening his grip but not letting go. Emma buried her face in his chest, still shaking from the trauma, her small body trembling as the reality of what almost happened settled over her. Marcus sat back on his heels, his own hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. He had done it. He had actually saved her. For a moment, he just breathed, matching his rhythm to Emma's recovering gasps, both of them grateful for air they'd taken for granted moments before. Jake was the first to react. He turned to Marcus, his weathered face a mixture of shock, gratitude, and disbelief. "Where did you learn that, kid?" His voice was gruff but soft, the tone reserved for speaking to someone who just performed a miracle. Marcus shrugged, suddenly aware of how he must look to these men. His dirty clothes, his hollow cheeks, the grime under his fingernails. "A foster mom taught me. Long time ago." He started to stand, ready to disappear back into the shadows where he belonged. But Jake's hand on his shoulder stopped him. The other bikers had formed a circle around them now, these hardened men wiping their eyes unashamedly. Wrench was still holding Emma, rocking her gently as she calmed down. One of the bikers, a guy with a long gray beard they called Prophet, stepped forward and placed his hand on Marcus's other shoulder. "You saved her life, son. You saved Wrench's baby girl." Marcus didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to gratitude, wasn't used to being seen at all, let alone acknowledged as someone who mattered. He nodded awkwardly, his eyes darting between the faces surrounding him. If you're watching this and your heart is racing just like ours, take a second to subscribe to the channel. Because what these bikers do next will change everything for this brave kid. The story is just beginning. Jake knelt down to Marcus's eye level, his intimidating presence softening as he studied the boy's face. "What's your name, son? Where are your parents?" The question Marcus had been dreading. The question that would reveal everything he'd been hiding. He swallowed hard, his moment of heroism about to expose him to a reality he'd been running from. "Marcus," he said quietly, "and I don't have parents. I don't have anybody." The silence that followed was heavy. Jake's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion but with understanding. He looked at Marcus's worn shoes, the dirty clothes, the haunted look that no 12-year-old should carry. "How long you been on the streets, Marcus?" 3 years. More or less. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. He waited for the judgment, the pity, or worse, the authorities they'd surely call. But Jake didn't reach for his phone. Instead, he stood and turned to his crew. Wrench, still holding Emma who had finally stopped shaking, met Jake's eyes. An entire conversation passed between them without words, the kind of silent communication that came from years of riding together, of trusting each other with their lives. Wrench nodded once, decisive. Jake turned back to Marcus. "You hungry, kid?" Before Marcus could answer, his stomach betrayed him with a loud growl. The bikers chuckled, but it wasn't cruel. Prophet walked to his bike and pulled out a cooler. "We got sandwiches, chips, some fruit." Emma was supposed to eat the real food before the cookies. He shot a meaningful look at Wrench, who had the decency to look sheepish. They sat Marcus down at a picnic table near the gas station, and suddenly food appeared from everywhere. Turkey sandwiches, apples, bags of chips, bottles of water and Gatorade. Marcus tried to eat slowly to maintain some dignity, but his body had other ideas. He devoured the first sandwich in seconds. "Easy, son," Jake said gently, sitting across from him. "Food's not going anywhere. We got plenty." Emma, recovered now and resilient as only children can be, wiggled out of her father's arms and walked over to Marcus. She held out a juice box. "Thank you for saving me." Her voice was small but sincere. "You're very brave." Marcus took the juice box, his eyes stinging with tears he refused to let fall. "You're welcome, Emma." As Marcus ate, the bikers talked among themselves in low tones. He caught fragments of their conversation. "Can't just leave him here. Kid's got guts. System failed him. One of us could." The words swirled around him, but Marcus tried not to hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment. Jake pulled out his phone and made a call, walking away from the group. Marcus watched nervously, wondering if this was it, if the cops were coming. But when Jake returned 20 minutes later, his expression was thoughtful, not apologetic. "Marcus," Jake said, sitting down heavily beside him. "I made some calls. We got a rally to get to in Sturgis, but it don't sit right with any of us, leaving you here after what you did, after who you are." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "How would you feel about riding with us for a while?" Marcus stared at Jake, certain he had misheard. "Ride with you?" His voice cracked with disbelief. "Like on the motorcycles?" Jake nodded, a slight smile tugging at his weathered face. "One of the guys called a friend who runs a youth shelter in Sturgis. Good place, run by good people. We'll get you there safe, make sure you're set up right. But first, you're riding with us to the rally. Consider it payment for saving Emma's life, though no payment could ever be enough." Wrench stood up, Emma perched on his hip. "Kid, you gave me my daughter back. Far as I'm concerned, you're family now. And we take care of family." The other bikers murmured their agreement, a chorus of deep voices affirming the decision. Marcus felt something break open inside his chest, something he'd kept locked away since his mother died. Felt like hope, but bigger, warmer. Felt like belonging. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Prophet called out. "Unless you got somewhere better to be." For the first time in 3 years, Marcus smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes and chased away some of the shadows that lived there. "Yes, I'll go with you." The transformation was immediate. The bikers sprang into action like a well-oiled machine. One of them, A guy called Tiny, who was ironically the biggest of them all, pulled out spare clothes from his saddlebag. "They're gonna be huge on you, kid. But they're clean." Another biker, Rattlesnake, handed over a new toothbrush still in its package and a small bottle of soap. "There's a restroom inside that still works. Go get cleaned up." When Marcus emerged 15 minutes later, scrubbed clean and wearing clothes that hung on his thin frame like a tent, the bikers had another surprise. Jake held out a helmet, not just any helmet, but one customized with flames that matched his bike. "It was my son's," Jake said quietly. "He outgrew it years ago. I'd be honored if you wore it." Marcus took the helmet with trembling hands, understanding the weight of what was being offered. This wasn't just protection for his head. This was acceptance. This was trust. They taught him how to ride as a passenger, how to lean with the bike, where to hold on, how to communicate with the rider. Emma, excited to have another kid around, showed him her hand signals and made him promise to ride next to her dad's bike so they could wave at each other. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the Arizona sky in shades of orange and purple, 12 motorcycles roared to life. Marcus climbed on behind Jake, his arms wrapped securely around the older man's waist. The helmet fit perfectly. The engine's vibration traveled through his body, powerful and alive. Jake turned his head slightly. "You ready, Marcus?" Marcus nodded, then remembered Jake couldn't see him. "Yeah, I'm ready." 2 years later, the Arizona sun still blazed hot, but Marcus Riley no longer sat in its punishing heat with nowhere to go. He stood in the garage of the youth center in Sturgis, South Dakota, a wrench in his hand and grease under his fingernails as he helped tune up a vintage Harley. At 14, he had grown taller, filled out, his hollow cheeks now healthy and full of color. The haunted look in his eyes had been replaced by confidence and purpose. The youth center that Jake's friend ran had become Marcus's home. He had his own room, attended the local high school where he maintained straight A's, and spent his afternoons learning mechanics in the garage. But more importantly, he had family. The Hells Angels checked on him regularly, rolling through Sturgis every few months, always making sure their boy was thriving. Jake had become the father figure Marcus never had. They talked on the phone every week, and Jake never missed Marcus's birthday or important school events. He showed up to parent-teacher conferences on his Harley, his leather vest and tattoos causing quite a stir, but his pride in Marcus's achievements louder than any judgment. Wrench and Emma visited too. Emma, now 10, had declared Marcus her honorary big brother, and she wrote him letters decorated with stickers and drawings. She was taking karate classes now, wanting to be strong like the boy who saved her life. Tommy sent photos of every belt she earned, his texts always ending with the same words. "Because of you, I get to watch her grow up." Marcus had learned something profound in those 2 years. Heroes weren't always the people you expected. Sometimes they wore leather and rode motorcycles. Sometimes they were gruff men with hard pasts who chose to build softer futures. And sometimes, being a hero was as simple as refusing to stay invisible when someone needed help. The other kids at the center looked up to Marcus. He tutored them in math, taught them basic first aid like Mrs. Chun had taught him, and reminded them that their past didn't define their future. He had started a program teaching motorcycle maintenance, partnering with local bikers who volunteered their time. The garage had become a sanctuary, just like the library once was. But now he was the one offering escape and hope to others. On the anniversary of the day he saved Emma, a package arrived. Inside was a leather vest, child-sized but official, with a patch that read Honorary Hells Angels and another that said Lifesaver. There was a note from Jake. "You earned this twice over, kid. Once for Emma, and again for choosing to live instead of just survive." Marcus hung the vest in his room, a reminder of the day everything changed, of the moment he decided to run toward trouble instead of away from it. Thank you so much for watching this story until the end. If it touched your heart, please hit that like button and leave a comment telling us what you thought. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more incredible stories like this one. And tell us in the comments what kind of story you'd like to see next. Your support means everything. Until next time, remember that sometimes the smallest act of courage can change everything.